You're listening to the Modern Saxophonist Podcast.
Welcome to the Modern Saxophonist Podcast. I'm your host, Mark MacArthur, and folks, this is a great day here in Las Vegas because I look out at some of those my northeasterner folks, and they got that big B word happening, the big blizzard, and I'm sitting here, and it is a balmy 85. And just beautiful sunshine. And I don't know what I'm doing inside podcasting, but I think I like this a little bit too much. But I get to talk to somebody who's living the dream up there in B-land, the blizzard land. Dr. Brian Kauth, how you doing?
Good. How you doing today, Mark?
I'm awesome. I got my coffee in hand. I've got my microphone in front of me, and I have a feeling I'm in for an incredibly fun conversation.
I hope so. Like I said, I try to be fun. I try to keep it real. I'm not pretending.
Yeah.
I'm not pretending anything over here.
That's right, man. And like I, we were just talking, folks, before the cast. We were talking about how if you're going to live in New York, you better keep it real. And in that area, and dealing with blizzards is one of them.
Yes.
How is that? How's your area around your domicile? Is it stacked to the roof, or what's going on?
Well, let's see. Yesterday had probably around 18 inches of snow. Yeah, so I can actually see from my dining room table. We have a nice little screen door, sliding glass doors there, and I'm looking out the window, and it's about up to my knees.
Whoa!
So, yes. Yep, and we have two little cats, and they couldn't peer above the snow to look out in the backyard or anything. So it was brutal.
Wow. I bet you put those little guys on the snow, they just fall straight through.
Oh, yeah. And then, let's see, I spent yesterday afternoon, it stopped snowing maybe around 5:30 or so. And my wife and I went out there, and we were shoveling using the snowblower for about 2 hours. It got too dark to see anything. And we went out this morning and finished shoveling the rest.
Oh, wow. That's man, that is a lifestyle that I have no idea about. This Florida boy transferred to the Southwest. I might have been born in Green Bay, but all I remember is don't eat the yellow snow.
Frank Zappa said it best.
Yes, he did. So I definitely am and it, it's at these times it reminds me, but we just it's amazing how disruptive it can be. I just feel for all those folks who's gotten trapped with some flights and having to get canceled and all that fun stuff. And March is a busy time no matter which way you look at it.
Yep.
And then to have one of these things roll through and just put a monkey wrench in just about everything you're doing.
Oh, yeah. And what was really kind of nuts was about 2 weeks ago, it was 60 degrees and sunny, and the weather was great. And we were all thinking, oh, spring is early this year. Oh, this will be nice. And then over the weekend, it snowed a little bit, on Saturday, and then woke up yesterday morning to a blizzard.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It reminded me of one time studying in Tucson, Arizona. It was really funny. It was Mother's Day. I was working as a valet at the Sheridan El Conquistador. That got me through pretty well. And here it is. It's Mother's Day. All these ladies are showing up. They asked us to wear nicer clothes, like kind of suits to walk them up, right? Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, a surprise snowstorm rolled through. there was ice and everything. And this is Mother's Day. I mean, we're talking, this is May. I'm like,
Right.
what is going on? Those shoes I had were, your typical nice dress shoes. Oh man, I think I hit the ground like 10 times. And when you live in the sunshine, you have absolutely no idea how to deal with some weather like that.
Oh yeah, it's brutal. When I was up at Fredonia, when I was doing my degree up there, same thing. It would start snowing in October, and it would go straight through until the end of April.
Oh man!
And it was all lake effect snow. It was nuts.
Oh, that's right. You would get a lot of lake effect snow up there. Yep.
And no tunnels between buildings. So we're all bundled up with our instruments and books and everything, going from class to class.
Yeah, I can imagine what my reads would go through like that.
Yeah. They were not happy. They were not happy.
Get it through to the next. You run into your next rehearsal, and then all of a sudden you take out the horn. It's ice cold. You start playing.
Yeah,
man, that's just brutal. That's just brutal. Yeah. So let's talk saxophone.
Okay.
Because folks, everybody who's listening, Brian and I haven't had a chance to meet yet, and we just decided that why don't we just get to know each other while we're podcasting, and so Brian, can you just give us a little background of like your saxophone, where you studied, who you are, and what you're doing there in New York?
Sure. Okay. So I'll try to make it as an interesting a story as possible, and not make it too long and too boring. So I started playing saxophone. Actually, it was my very first instrument. I started back. We had fourth grade band in my elementary school, and we were able
fourth grade.
Yeah, we started in fourth grade.
Now that to me, I've got fourth grade. That that's pushing it, because those little everybody who's got hands, you see the fourth graders, man, that's a reach.
Yeah. And we didn't play that many notes. I mean, basically it was all like left hand notes, B, A, G, and
right.
C, maybe F sharp, but that was about it.
Variations on hot cross buns.
Exactly.
And B flat.
Yep. So I started, fourth grade band on saxophone, and I just continued, all the way through the rest of elementary school, middle school, high school. And I actually didn't start taking private lessons until I was a senior in high school. And by that time, I had developed, bad habits, only play certain things, and so I hooked up with a couple of private teachers and started working with them, got a little bit better. And I auditioned for SUNY Fredonia, and I went to school at Fredonia. I studied originally with Dr. Lawrence Wyman, who had really built the program up over the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And then when he retired, I began studying with Wildy Zumwalt when he was the successor. And so I stayed on and did my master's with Wildy as well. I just went right through and took a year off and did some teaching, some band directing, things like that up in Western New York. And then I decided to go to the University of Southern Mississippi and study with Dr. Lawrence Quads. And that was a great experience. That was complete culture shock, moving from New York to Hattiesburg. And
right.
Yeah,
and one of these does not look like the other.
Exactly. And to top that all off, when I first moved there, it was 2 weeks before Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf Coast. So I went through all of that as well.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. That's is that at that time? I mean, that devastation that hurricane ripped. I mean, I grew up in Florida, and Tampa Bay area and Denver really got hit that hard. But knowing what it's like to live through a hurricane, for you to have to do that in your second week there.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yep. We'd only had, I think, 2 days of classes, and then they canceled for 2 weeks after that. And so I wound up going to Atlanta just for like 2 weeks, just to hang out and just get away while they rebuilt the city a little bit and, cleaned up the campus. So then, I went back and finished my degree. And along the way, I've had the opportunity to work with some other players as well. I've been to several workshops that the Rocher Quartet has done throughout the States. That's always an experience working with them. They're just phenomenal players and musicians, so it was great to work with them on a few different occasions. And I also took a couple of lessons with Karina Rocher, which, again, very, very informative, very eye-opening. And about 7 years ago, I had the opportunity to go work with Londiex in Bordeaux for a week. And that was probably the most intense series of lessons I've ever had in my whole life.
I bet.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's start there with Londiex and being there. Now, how many lessons did you have while you were there?
I had 4 lessons. Each one was 3 hours long. Wow.
And so I've never had the opportunity to work with Jean Marie Londiex, and I'm speaking from a man. I would absolutely love that opportunity, but you got to tell me what when you did those 3 hour lessons, because I mean, everybody who lives through teaching a 1 hour lesson, there's a flow and a pattern to that. But when you do 3 hours, there's about, I've always found that even with myself, like after about hour and 15 minutes, there is a brain overload.
Yeah.
That starts to kick in.
Yeah. And I will say that, those few lessons I did have with him, they were very detail oriented, starting from the very first tone I played to the very last one, and it was going through every possible parameter of playing. Why did you play that particular pitch this way? And 2 pages later, you played it this way. Where's the correlation between the two? Really in depth, really almost like Zen saxophone in a way, really making me think outside the box. And, I made the mistake, and I say this with very tongue in cheek. I made the mistake of bringing the Denisov Sonata. And that's where all that came from, We spent 20 minutes just articulating one note over and over and over again, and all the different color possibilities. And yeah, and then the dynamic things. Oh, it's not soft enough, or it's not loud enough, making them from one movement to the next be seamless, and that all works out. That was challenging, very challenging.
Yeah, I think, well, if I were to go do those lessons, I'm relatively positive the Denisov would be involved as well. I mean, if you're gonna have anybody discuss a piece that you want it to be the piece that they know the best.
Exactly.
And for everything that Jean Marie Londiex was able to do through premiering and promoting and being attached to the Denisov Sonata, I can certainly see your reasoning behind that. But I and what you're experiencing. I mean, I don't know. I think it's so funny to some of my students who they I'll go, hey, look, guys, this is, I don't mean to steer you this direction, but this piece is something that I'm really passionate about.
Right.
Let's do that. And then it's so funny how they will bring in new literature and go, hey, check this out. And you sit there and you go, but I told you this one because, and it's not like they win the argument, but it's the fact that it's like, when you can maximize for a teacher what they know, what's in their wheelhouse. We're not talking in generalities. We're talking in now we've lived this piece. We own it. I think it was it was an interesting experience. I got to play the San Antonio, Harbison's San Antonio for Harbison. Okay. As he gave a workshop here at University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And I was like, oh man, this is great. And then he said something afterwards that struck me. He goes, he said, that's a really nice first performance. He was really complimentary. And then he just says, I wonder what 500 would sound like.
Yeah.
And that's where it kind of hit home for me. Is like, what piece have you played 500 times?
Right.
I don't know about you, but I'm even wondering, like, in our literature for what we've done for a public consumption, I mean, I might for a single piece be in the 50s, but 500, and of course we're talking about concert, like I say, concert pianists that will tour. And they're a recitalist, and every single time, they're playing 300 dates a year, and that kind of a thing. And using similar repertoire. That kind of blew my mind when he said it. I was just sitting there going, well, yeah, I think it would sound different.
and just just being that familiar with the piece. Stuff, and knowing every little nuance and every gesture, and being able to just know, for example, just know the piano part inside and out. Not just your part, but knowing the pianist's part. That's so crucial. Really make the piece become that much more alive.
Yeah.
It's
I agree. Now, hey, some people may be looking. Is there anything in the Denisov that you got from Londiex that happened to be like, oh my gosh, this is something that everybody needs to know?
Well, there was a couple of things. The first being just the sheer amount of detail that went into articulation and dynamics. That see a staccato on the very first page, every staccato throughout the entire piece needs to be played the exact same way, no matter what the articulation was. I mean, it's a completely serialized work. Everything had to be that much more precise, and that's something that I know for me myself. When I first studied the piece as a doctoral student, working on it on my own afterwards, I thought, I'm playing staccato, or I'm playing this marcato or legato, whatever it happened to be, but it wasn't the same throughout. And it challenged my listening a lot, by really listening to it and hearing it the way it should be throughout the entire piece. So that was the first thing. The dynamics as well. I mean, there are some really soft dynamic markings in that second movement, and it was never soft enough. It was never soft enough. And the same thing with some of the loud moments, like the last tone of the first movement and the last movement. They're just these really ripping loud, high F sharps, I think they are, and just like that has to be so in your face, and that was never loud enough. So, just looking at just the width, the breadth of the dynamics, just making them that much more intense and that much wider.
Yeah, when I studied that piece, that was the one that it became the hours and hours of defining what exactly a pianissimo was versus a triple pianissimo versus a mezzo forte. Like when you see mezzo forte in that piece, like that's an impactful marking. Where you take out another a completely just a nice maybe a 19th century work, and you see mezzo forte, completely different meaning.
Yes, exactly. So the dynamics in particular, that was another thing that just really challenged me in a lot of ways of listening and just my own personal control over the instrument. With the second movement, I remember this very, very vividly. I was playing it very rhapsodically, very, not romantically, but definitely had a tinge of rubato in there. And I remember him just stopping me and asking me, "Is this an improvisation?" I don't think so. I mean, I had never thought about it in that way before. But we discussed it a little bit, and he said, "Oh, it is really an improvisation. But is it your improvisation?" No. He's like, "Yes, it's Denisov's. So let's play it like Denisov would want to hear this improvisation." And so the rhythms, even though they're extremely challenging in that movement without bar lines, and they're still challenging, they had to be very precise, and so playing them so precisely that it sounded like an improvisation rather than
isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
I love it. No, would be to cut you off there, but isn't that the interesting aspect of doing something? I mean, even when I teach, even like the Bozza improvisation at Caprice, and you sit there and you go, and I don't mean to relate the two, but it does use different metering and different divisions of the meter, and so you sit there and you go, have you ever, it's like, I asked the student, have you ever tried putting a metronome on and playing it straight, exactly like kind of how it was written? Do you know how amazingly beautiful it is when you play the rhythms really close to exactly how they're supposed to go?
Yeah. It's
amazing. And so, but the Denisov is a completely different approach to that.
Yeah.
And as you do get some of the looseness, and you are still going through multiple quarter tones and a couple multiphonics, and with that precise movements, it really I'm glad you brought that up. I think I would have liked to have been in that lesson. Yeah.
Oh, it was intense. It was intense. That was 3 hours of just hardcore butt kicking. It was just, I remember leaving that day thinking to myself, "Oh my God, what did I just do?" I asked for this, and I really got it.
I love that. Well, I mean, that isn't that kind of what it is? I mean, you once you get kicked in a little bit, early on, all of a sudden it's so funny. It's like we want the abuse. It's like, yeah, bring it on. I love this.
Yeah, and I've had that experience with other teachers too. It's when I took a few lessons with same type of thing, like really intense, really just kicking my butt across the room with paying attention to all these little things, and can you hear everything before you play it, and articulation's not good, let's fix this. I mean, it was the same type of scenario. So I've experienced that a lot. Maybe it's just me, I don't know, maybe I just
no. No, and I think that's that actually, if we don't have that, it's just kind of like just as we're developing, I actually find that the more that we have to push against, the more the more intense our learning and our growth is. And I think that you need resistance, and part of that resistance is the fact that and you find this in a lot of places where some disciplines is I don't know, I find we're a lot nicer these days than what I remember when but again, it's just a remembrance.
Right.
But I don't think my students would say that, but but I feel like in those moments, I'll share this, is that when I really enjoyed it when Kellen Thomas got to the University of Arizona, and one of our lessons, I was really fighting how detail oriented he was, and I realized that I was in the wrong. And so I woke up and I just said, you know what, how about this? I walked into his office, and this is not during our lesson time, and I said, I give you all the permission in the world to kick my butt as hard as you can kick it, and I won't do anything else but do exactly what you ask. And I walked out the door. Mm-hmm. The next lesson certainly lived up to what my request was, but I think, I even think that from a student's perspective, that's actually what makes the difference. Is when the student makes that call and makes that decision. Yeah. So, if you fly all the way to France to get your butt kicked by Londiex, and you came out and you got your butt kicked by Londiex, that sounds like mission accomplished.
It's certainly one of those experiences that's given me, a completely new perspective on how detail oriented I need to be, because I had always, thought throughout my studies that, I'm being pretty detail oriented, but I was never being that detail oriented. I realized I might have glossed over several things. So this was, definitely one of the experiences I needed to have my butt kicked enough to say, hey, pay attention to all of these little things. It's going to make you sound so much better if you do.
That is great. That is so awesome. We've thanks for sharing this story, because I got to tell you, this is where, for all of us, we can, if we're listening to this podcast particularly, I can't imagine anybody just strolling in on this that isn't a saxophonist or isn't somebody who likes to study. Mm-hmm. But everybody's got a story when it comes to this, and I think a lot of people are nodding their head, and I think it's these experiences I'm always interested in. I actually got this is. I haven't told anybody this, and I especially haven't even told my teacher, Kellen Thomas. So maybe I'll have to forward this to him. But I had talked to Kellen one day, and just catching up, mm-hmm. and talking about what's happened here in Las Vegas, and then I hung up. Well, he's like, I got to go to a lesson. So here I am driving, and I get a call from Kellen again. I was like, what's going on? And it was actually, he butt dialed me. And so I went, Kellen. And I started hearing saxophone. I'm like, so I ended up staying on the line for probably about 25 minutes, listening to him teach a lesson. And it was the Botry Divertimento, and the kid, whoever was in that lesson, sounded great. I was so. It's a phone microphone, but I was so, and everything Kellen was doing, I was just like, it was like one of those, like, it's an eavesdropping moment. Mm-hmm. But he butt down me, and here's the funny thing: I got a clue into, like, I was listening to it, I'm just like, oh my gosh, yes, he's doing the same thing. I remember that. Oh, that is so, and I'm like, I know where he's at right now. He's standing right over his shoulder, and he is like wanting to get more out of him. I love it, and it was a great moment, and I actually got to hear that again, and it's just like, I just wonder if we all could eavesdrop a little bit on some of our favorite, just even if we ever got just that real authentic, real moment. Like, we get a lot of produced videos and a lot mm-hmm. of other stuff, and we get a lot of master classes where clearly it's for an audience and other things. But those private lessons are private lessons. Right. And and I'll tell you, there's quite a few private lessons I would not want anybody eavesdropping on me.
Me too.
What's happening?
Me too.
And hey, when all that WikiLeaks came out, and I was like, "Oh, your computer's watching you," I'm like, "Well, at least they're hopefully they like saxophone."
Yeah. There's nothing better than saxophone.
So I thought about this, and I'm sitting there going, okay, but you wonder, you sit there and you think about what does that look like in those moments, and I think it's so inspiring. So thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. And I wanted to mention Wildy because he was at Northern Arizona for a little while before he went over to Fredonia, and being at University of Arizona, we got to work with him, and he's such just an incredible man in saxophone. I'm just so glad to have been influenced a little bit by a guy like Wildy.
Yeah, he is such an incredible teacher, player, person. It's actually his birthday today. So happy birthday, Wildy.
Happy birthday, Wildy. And I will make sure that as soon as we get done, I am going to make sure the podcast gets out. And so there we go.
Yeah, Wildy was definitely probably my biggest influence as a player. A lot of people have said, "Oh, I hear you." Little bits of Wildy in your playing. I think even Eric Bradley might have mentioned that once or twice, through posts on Facebook.
Nice.
And so he's definitely had a huge influence on me. Dr. Gwad's definitely another huge influence on me. And all those teachers, even if you work with them only peripherally, even for like a lesson or two, you always take something away. And that always stays with you. So even if you don't play anything like them at all, you always come back with something that you can hold on to and share with students. So it's really great.
Without a doubt. Well, we had talked, and it was so nice to get an email from you, and just it was really nice to know that you've been listening to the podcast on your trips, journeys into New York, and when you wrote it, I think in this, lately, I've been getting a lot of mail and a lot of email and a lot of people just saying how they're enjoying what's happening. And of course, that's what I'm doing it for. And so, right. so I think but one of the things that you mentioned is that your dissertation is on the Roman Palester saxophone concerto.
Yes.
And so I think right now, I think it'd be good for us to definitely find out a little bit about this concerto, and because I have, like I told you in my email, I am. This is a piece of the repertoire I am not familiar with, but I am now, because I listened to your recording. I think it's on SoundCloud, off your website. So so I am now familiar, and I do enjoy the work. And
good.
So tell us a little bit about it.
Okay, so this piece just completely fell into my lap, just like on a whim one day, because when I was at Southern Miss, Dr. Gwaz and I were trying to discuss possible dissertation topics. And so sometimes that could be a really fun conversation. Other times it's a conversation that you kind of say to yourself, oh, I don't know if I want to spend all this time writing about this, it doesn't sound all that interesting. So he and I were kind of just shooting topics back and forth one afternoon. I would come up with an idea and he would say, well, that's okay, but no one's really going to want to read that. That's kind of boring or something, And so we came up with this completely other topic idea that I was totally going to go with. And I had started like a little bit of research about it. And then one day kind of says to me, I think it might have been one of my lessons. He says, you seem like you're really interested in writing about a piece of music. Yeah, I kind of am. I want to research the history of something. And he goes over to his filing cabinet, pulls out this manuscript, like a photocopy of a manuscript. And he kind of hands it to me and says, all right, well, see if you can figure something out about this. It was the Palester Concerto. And so I said, okay, I'll see what I can find. And this just opened up this whole new world of stuff I'd never heard of before. I had no idea who this composer was. I never heard any of his music. And so my first stop was the Londiex Comprehensive Guide. So I looked in there and looking at all of the information I could find, and there was just a little blurb in there about the style of what Palester wrote. But I looked and I said, it's written for Sigurd Roscher and David Patuch. So right away, that kind of piqued my interest. I'm like, well, who's David Patuch guy? I don't know who this is. And I said, Roscher? That's kind of cool. So let me go in this, see if I can find some stuff out. And I spent a lot of time on the internet emailing people. Just emailing. I emailed David Patuch. I emailed some other people. I think I emailed Karina as well, Karina Roscher. I emailed several people and just started asking questions about this. And I started looking at where some of Palester's music was published. And surprisingly, very little of it was published. What is published in Poland, WM. So I contacted them, and I found out that they didn't have this piece. They had no idea that this piece really existed. And so this was like a huge scavenger hunt. And I kind of did some more research, found out that there was a Polish musicologist who wrote a biography of Palester. So I contacted her and kind of figured out through all of my emailing that University of Warsaw Library had manuscript copies of this piece. So I said, okay, let me contact them. So I contacted them, and about 2 weeks later, I get this package in the mail, and it's like 2 inches thick, and it's all of these photocopies of scores, like the couple of different versions of the score. And I remember going to Dr. Guaz's office with it, and I showed him this, and he just looked at me and he said, well, now you've got your topic. You've got something to do now. And so that's kind of how that happened. And it was a lot of fun, actually. I know some people really dread the dissertation writing process, and they dread the research portion, but I had a lot of fun doing it. Really did. It was just, it was intense for a while, sure, but I liked the whole scavenger hunt that I had to go on to find all of these different pieces of it.
Yeah, and especially to find out that this it's locked away in Warsaw, and here it is. I mean, I think I love scavenger hunts. I'm a rabbit hole guy. I will jump. My wife knows that I freely jump in rabbit holes that I might not really need to jump in, and I will work my way to the end of that rabbit hole, get out of the end of it, look up like I'm just proud that I went through that process, and my wife looking at me, and she just shakes her head, and so.
It seemed like the more stuff I found, there was just more questions. There were more things I had to find out about it, and I figured out that there were two different versions of this piece, and that really just kind of struck me as like, okay, well, where's this other version of it? And I actually was able to find all of the different extant versions of this and put them together and kind of look at them side by side and say, oh, these are like almost two different pieces. They have the same name and there's similarities, but they're almost like two completely different works compositionally. Yeah. Yeah, and so that became the whole foundation of my dissertation, was comparing the two versions of it that were out there. So that I spent a lot of time just kind of like looking through the magnifying glass, looking at every little detail. I had to scrutinize every note that was written down, dynamic marking, articulation, everything, just to kind of compare them measure by measure, note for note. And it was a kind of a cool process to see, from my perspective as a performer, how the composer changed over time, how his whole style changed. That was really, really kind of a neat thing to see.
Yeah. I think, okay. So once it developed and you've got, you're comparing the two.
Mm-hmm.
So did any one of the, these versions were they, this is Palester that did the versions.
Yes.
And so what was the conclusion that the later version was his intent, or is there an indication that one was later?
There was never any indication that I was able to find out about which one he preferred. I know that some composers withdraw earlier versions of works. I mean, the Dahl is probably the most well-known example for saxophonists, that the original version, Dahl just withdrew and absorbed part of it into the Sinfonietta for band. The revised version is what Dahl really wanted. So that's why that's the only version we can get nowadays. But with this piece, it wasn't like that. Since everything was in manuscript and Palester was no longer alive and there were no family members that I could actually ask as well. So this was like really kind of like needle in a haystack. There was really no indication about which version was preferred. I saw that he had done this with some of his other pieces. He has a violin concerto that I think went through 3 different versions. And some of his orchestral music also went through multiple versions. So I'm thinking it might have just been like, this is just a natural progression through his style. He'd go back and revisit earlier works and just kind of maybe modernize them for time that he was working on them. So there really was no indication, at least from what I was able to ascertain.
Do you think that has to do with maybe the performer and how the performer was trying to, was going to be performing it?
I think that's part of it. In this case, it's different than the Dahl, because the original Dahl is so much more difficult than the revised version. Or high register in there. The technical demands are just insane in the original Dahl. But in the Palester, it's much more modest. There is not a whole lot of high register. The technique is well within the grasp of college level players, so it's not a difficulty level. I think it was more of David Patuch came along at the right time and, inquired about the piece, and Palester said, well, okay, then I'll make this version for you that is more modern in terms of what I do now. I think that's where a lot of it came from. Because it is a different piece. I mean, the version that you listen to that's on SoundCloud on my website, that's the original version. That's the original 1938 version. The revised version has been recorded by David Patuch. It's on a commercial recording done. And if you compare the two, they sound very different. There's a couple of similarities in terms of melodic structure and stuff like that, but other than that, it's very different.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So the original version obviously then was with Rasher.
Yes.
Encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I love is you just mentioned the date 1938, and there's an awful lot of pieces that came around because of Rasher in that area of 1936 to 1938, 39 area. And then for this to be one that may be a little forgotten, but I think what it also goes to speak to, and I'm sorry if I'm jumping on your toes here a little bit, is it goes to speak to the breadth and the activity and enthusiasm of Rasher to promote and build the repertoire. And the fact is like this just hit me, is the fact that, okay, we have works from that time period that we all are very, very familiar with, and we'll just speak to Eber, okay, and then all of a sudden, and then we go and we start thinking about our whole everything that's happening in music, and is that when you ask and you get something that lasts, there's probably about 10 pieces that were also around, asked that didn't last, that didn't make it,
right?
As far as that's concerned. And so this is kind of an interesting is I will, I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of research on this, and Wildy can tell us, because there's tons of, the whole Rasher library and things are there now at Fredonia, but how, just the breadth of how much works were asked to be written and performed in that time frame.
Yeah, in that time frame, there's so many. I mean, he was working not just with orchestras and conductors, but he was working with pianists as well. So there's a lot of chamber music that also came out of the 30s. Pieces like the Jacobi Sonata, the Sonata by Knorr, some pieces that were also just recently published, the Sonata by Hans Brehme, which is another monster sonata. I mean, really, really fantastic piece. Very difficult piece, considering it's from 1932 and got high register stuff that nobody at the time was doing. So there are these pieces, these sonatas. There's a couple other ones. There's the Osterch Sonata from a Czech composer from 1935. Plus, you have the Eber, the Glazunov, the Larsen Concerto, and then the Martin Ballade comes out from the 1938 as well. So you have all of these amazing pieces, these huge pieces from this one 10-year time span. It's really incredible how much he was working, how much effort he was going into play for composers and work with them and basically help spawn this repertoire, a lot of this repertoire that we have today.
Yeah, and Brian, we've got email these days. It's easy.
Yeah, yeah. It really is. You just go on Facebook and email anybody.
Yeah, right. And he's. I imagine the amount of because I can imagine. I mean, I've done a little sales in my time, and. And they tell you, you can expect a 1% response, for any kind of marketing or anything that you send out, and you sit there and you go, you think about how many letters he must have written in order to be able to provoke this much activity. And not only that, I mean, if he's surely going to all these places, I'm sure that means that he would definitely be the activity of him personally traveling and being in those locations and creating those relationships and fostering. It really is astounding.
Yeah, and he was always playing. Being kind of spent my entire education being immersed in all these people that studied with Rasher.
Right.
I don't want to really say this Rasher school because I don't like putting these labels on things like guys on Facebook do. But
fair enough.
Yeah. So I know that, paid for everything. He was always eager to demonstrate what the instrument could do. and he played, what he was performing. If he was playing a concert, he'd probably play stuff from that concert. I'm sure he played Bach. Bach was always a staple of his recitals. So, he's playing for these composers and other musicians all the time just to show that this is a legitimate instrument. This has a place in music, serious classical music here. This is what it can do. It's not just playing entertainment music. So much we can do with this instrument. And so, it's really astonishing to think about, 70, 80 years ago when he's doing this. He's really going to these composers and these different places, and kind of take it for granted nowadays. We can just go on the internet and find somebody, send him an email, and not even be in the same vicinity. And he's traveling all over the place. It's really astonishing to think of now that, is there any musician nowadays that would even consider doing that? Just to...
I got to tell you that, that type of, it's just a different day and age.
Yeah.
Because we're asking different questions and we're doing different things. Mm-hmm. Because people like Rasher laid that particular groundwork. Mm-hmm. Like our questions, our activities today are only as a result of some of that ground was already taken and already covered. And I think when we are in a day and age when we have so many brilliant musicians coming out as saxophonists who are just playing and doing what you said. They're doing such a wonderful job. There's great entrepreneurship. There's great. They're doing things in their communities that are phenomenal. We have people that do things in their local community, and that's their focus. There's others that are national. There's others that are international names and promote. And all of them have. It's kind of like a symbiotic relationship now with everything. But it is as a result of that type of ferocity of early work. And I liken it to like what it would be to, you don't take a yacht and try to cut through ice with a yacht. Mm-hmm. You get an icebreaker ship that's built for it, that has a bow that can take it. And as it cuts through the ice, it's got one heck of a job. But if that yacht wants to come in and follow behind, it's going to be able to. It's not even a problem because because the ice has already been broken. Right. And I think in terms of this is where you look at we're so. Like a lot of times we complain about our history of saxophone and how there is not as rich of a history as, say, a violin or a flute repertoire and these kind of things. But really, we actually have the pleasure of having an instrument that is so up close in its history and so documented now and so and the fight is real that you can actually see this, that if you choose to study saxophone, it's like you choose to take on that mantle, but also you realize that you're kind of in this brotherhood of this promotion and this just trying to be a part of the conversation and getting this good news out, as I said in an earlier podcast, the gospel of sax.
Yes. Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. And when I first started, when I first went to college, I knew none of this. I was so naive. I had no idea what world I was stepping into. I had no idea, and for a lot of the younger listeners that might be out there, it's the saxophone world, it might seem big. It's really not that big. It's still so young, and a lot of crossing over, and we all kind of know who each other are. It's not like the violin world or the flute world or the piano world where it's been around for centuries. So much more stuff, it's like we're kind of living history in a way. We are. And it's funny. You go and I got a chance to see at the MTNA National that was here. James Galway did a clinic, and it was so funny how here he's talking and he runs through the list of all the flute repertoire that I hear at juries or early juries that are like, this is the, and I turned to our flute professor and I said, okay, it's just hitting me. Is this literature really the codified, this is how you learn flute, and you just go through all of these different pieces? She looked at me and goes, yeah, that's it. And I look, and I say, what's interesting? If we took a sample of what everybody's repertoire lists are, there's going to be some similarities for sure. But there is so much variety for what you can start with saxophone and teach with, and it's not codified across, it's not systemized. And I think what's wonderful, and yes, we have had some variations where maybe some pieces that are not as structural, worth the study ends up coming out sometimes. Okay, that's fine. It's just natural progression. But that's where I kind of, that is, as you say, to the young player, this is a fresh instrument. We have, and we've got literature quite literally coming out every single year that just keeps on blowing our minds and keeps on trucking. And it is, and every time that somebody plays saxophone, and I'm going to put that on there. Yes,
that every single time it's played well, there is people are impacted in such a way that they can't even believe that it sounds so good, and it's so whatever music was delivered can take them away from what they're doing in the moment. So yes, saxophone's great.
Yes, it is so great. Yeah. So
go ahead.
And what you're saying about the repertoire list, kind of some pieces will obviously be similar across the board. Like everyone who goes to college is going to study Creston. They're going to study Glazunov. They're going to study Ibert. Everybody does. But beyond a handful of standard pieces, it's whatever you want to make of it. Whatever repertoire interests you, you wind up, or whatever your teacher says. You know what? This piece is going to fill some void in your pedagogy. Learn this piece. There's so much stuff out there. It's incredible, and and unfortunately, like a piece like the Palester, kind of fell through the cracks a little bit. It hasn't really, outside of a handful of people, no one really knows that this thing exists, and it's a good piece, but it's probably going to take a lot of time before it to kind of on a little bit.
Right. And that is and what you're doing with your dissertation, by focusing on it is bringing a light to it. And also the fact that there's a value in looking at some of these older works that have not been looked at.
Right.
And so as we do so, you're championing the piece, and that means that it does have a life, and it will continue to have a life, and that's the whole point.
Right. That's one of the reasons why I took so much to the project was, something that I can really bring this piece to life. I can really show people that this piece was a person who wrote this, that there is a history behind this piece, and really just kind of, make it your own in a way.
Yeah.
Because, everybody has some piece of music or a couple of pieces of music that they just love. They can play really well. They know the ins and outs of it, and it's like their piece.
Yeah.
And for me, this is one of those pieces. I spent so much time working on it and studying it and writing about it that, for me, this is a piece I really believe in, and I think it's worthwhile.
That is awesome. Do you think... well, first of all, a question I'm sure somebody is asking right now is, one, is it published to where you can purchase it or get a hold of it?
The revised version is. The revised version was published a few years ago by PWM Edition in Poland. If you just Google PWM Polish music, you'll probably be able to pull it right up. So the revised version is available with piano reduction. So you can find that. The original version is not. And so now we have the question of, well, could the original version actually be published? The answer I got was not really. When I inquired about this WM, once I found out that the revision was published, they basically said, well, can't now because this version is out. This is what we were given. This is what we're going to publish. So that's kind of where that one ends, unfortunately.
Right. So if you have a preference, I mean, obviously you said that the recording that's up is the original version. Mm-hmm. Is that your preference to perform the original version?
It is mine because of how the piece was written. There's a lot of energy in that original version that, for me at least, I don't hear in the revision. And if anybody is really interested, they can get my dissertation and look at every detail that's different between them. But as an overview, a couple of things that did strike me as being very different are the formal structure. It went from a 2-movement piece to the original versions laid out a lot like the Iber. Fast movement, second movement that's kind of divided in half, a slow section, a fast. Vision is like a single movement like Glazunov. It's just one continuous piece. The other thing that struck me being very different was the rhythm, just the rhythms of the piece. The original version has a lot of viola, a lot of syncopation in there, a lot of these subtle jazz inflections in some spots that you can emphasize to whatever degree you want, but there are also very specifically written, syncopated rhythms. And in the new version, the revised version, everything became streamlined rhythmically. And I think it shows just how much power rhythm has in music. Completely change the character of a piece just by moving a beat a little bit earlier or a little bit later. Incredible.
Oh yeah. And that, if you have those any kind, it's really powerful when you have a jazz reference or some sort of nuanced reference like that, mm-hmm. that happens in a piece. Like it can really change the whole direction and feel and focus of it. And that's interesting that gets eliminated. Did you find out? I'm sorry. I'm just following the rabbit hole.
That's
okay. Did you find out? I know it may be difficult, but did you find out why?
The only explanation I was able to come up with was because of how the composer's musical language changed. it looks like, at least through the compositions of his that I've seen and the recordings that I was lucky enough, that his music went from a very low classical period, like almost like Stravinsky-ish stuff. And the trend in Polish music was to move towards an emphasis on tone color, chromatism. And it seemed like all of the rhythmic elements became less important because now he was emphasizing a lot more chromaticism and colors. I mean, orchestral music is loaded, just almost sounds like Klangfarben melody, just different tone colors popping out all over the place at the expense of, any type of rhythmic structure that kind of, permeates an entire piece. So I think that's probably why some of the rhythms were removed in order to emphasize this element of chromaticism.
That answers my question. Man, I love this. This is good. That's my favorite role, man. I just get to ask these questions and just, knowing there's somebody on the other end that might want to ask the same question. It encourages me more. I just get I'm like, yeah, I'll ask it. Yep, you bet. Further down the rabbit hole I go.
Yes, and that's exactly what the whole aspect of my research was. It's like I'd go down one path, all of a sudden there was another one. There was another one, and it's just one after the other. So it opens up so many different pathways and questions. It's intense. I love it. It's great.
Yeah, me too. I'm loving this because I like going down these rabbit holes. And Brian, you are a kindred spirit for sure.
Oh, awesome.
So I gotta say we're for what a length of an episode, we're probably pretty close. But I wanted to ask you, and we can tie this into how people can reach you and whatnot. But some of the life, what you're doing right now in the New York area, and everything. What's happening nowadays?
Okay, so I live outside of New York. I live up in the Hudson Valley region, which is a pretty large region. So I'm actually about an hour and a half or so from New York City. And I teach part-time down in Manhattan at Community College, at Borough of Manhattan Community College. And I also teach middle school band in Ellenville, New York. I do that as well. We've actually been off the last 2 days because of the blizzard. So it's that's what I do as well. I have a couple of private students that work really hard, and I just play. And the playing that I've been doing lately, it's actually kind of been interesting because I've been trained so much as a classical player, and the classical playing I do now is so minimal compared to playing jazz music. I've learned that I got out of school and I'm thinking, oh yeah, I'm gonna be able to, just email people, contact people. I'll be able to put recitals on. It's going to be great and do this. And then I started doing that, and the number of responses you get is minimal. So I started really honing in on my jazz chops, which I didn't think I had any. But, I realized I do have some in there. I've been working, ending my jazz playing a lot. I've been playing regularly with a series of different bands up here in the Hudson Valley. Hotels, bars, name it. We've done it. So I'm doing a lot of that type of playing. I still do the classical playing, I give a recital every year down at Borough of Manhattan Community College. We do that. We do faculty recitals, and I do classical playing for that. I go to the Navy Band Symposium and played this past January. Go to the NASA conferences, that type of stuff. So I'm doing a lot of that type of playing, classical playing, and then around the Hudson Valley, it's a lot of jazz playing. Doing musicals too, had to work on doubling a little bit more than I've done in the past. So yeah, it's just trying to do like the working saxophonist right now. Doing all the stuff that we've got to do to kind of stay active and stay relevant.
Exactly, and this is interesting. I'm looking forward. I've got a podcast I'll be doing soon on on business entrepreneurship, and this is kind of my interest is how is it working in other areas? I think one of the most interesting definitions, and I'm really glad that you went through because it does seem like a lot of us are doing like 8 different things. Yes, and we are all. We're going through our list. I gotta tell you, I found a home in church actually, where my wife and I get to do a lot of church music together, and so yes, I have I've thrown on my nice contemporary piece, and I dial up the reverb as far as it can go. And so you sit there and you go, yeah. How do you maintain? I love what you're doing because I'm with you. I'm teaching middle school at a private school right now as well, middle school band, and I have to be honest. Everybody who knows me will know I have always professed there is no way you could ever get me to teach middle schoolers.
I was the same way.
I was like, there's no way. That age just scares the living tar out of me. They are just how do you deal with that level of sarcasm?
Yeah.
And you know what? I found out. I love it.
Yeah, I have this group. They're fantastic. I've been working with them for the last 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it makes everything worthwhile. And you just. I like working with these kids. My job easier.
Exactly. That is such a good thing to hear. I think, and I think saxophonists, the one thing is that, it's always about education. There's something that we'll always do in education. I love it when I hear a performer say, well, I don't want to teach. There's no way I'm going to teach. I'm like, brother, if you influence somebody, you're going to be teaching. And I just love it. I got a heart for anybody who's out there that want, I love, hey, we're speaking the same language because basically we can go down the list of all the things that you just went down. I could copy you on the other side of things that are happening. And I think, that's good. That's really good. Now, let's get to this because I want people to be able to find you,
okay,
and hear you, and if out of this we can get even a couple more classical performances out of you, here and there, and let's see if that can happen. So where can people reach you?
Okay, well, you can find me on my website. That's probably the first step. It's Brian Kauth. It's KAUTH .wordpress.com. That's probably the easiest way to find me. For the guy with the silver saxophone, smiling. That's my website. I'm also on Facebook. An easy Facebook search, you'll pop up. SoundCloud, just search my name as well and pop up there. And my email, all of my contact information's out there. Drop me a line. I love email. Email is great. So if anybody wants to get in touch with me, you can find me on my website or Facebook and shoot me a message. It'll get to me.
Very cool. And so, hey folks, this is the Modern Saxophonist Podcast. You can reach us at www.themodernsaxophonist.com. themodernsaxophonist@gmail.com is our email. At the Modern Sax, Twitter, and follow us on Facebook and keep up to date. And other than that, you can. The door is open. I'm telling you. I think everybody who's contacted me that's got something interesting to talk about. I'm a sucker for stories. I love stories, as we've learned from this episode for sure. And I will. And I love going on rabbit trails. So if you're willing to go down there, I'm willing to go. And so. So, gotta say, Brian, this has been a fantastic conversation.
Yes, I loved it. This is great.
I appreciate your willingness, and I think we're going to have to do this again sometime.
I think so. Maybe I'll come up with some other stories. I've got tons of them.
Yeah, that's good. All right, fair enough. I think this is a PG show. That's for sure. That's for sure. And so as we get going, folks, thank you very much for being active listeners. Now I encourage you to be active sharers. Get your friends on the podcast train and loving this podcast, because the more that I see people download it, the more people I see listen, the more things that happen, the more encouraged I get. Like I said, I'm the rabbit hole guy. So I'll keep on following these rabbit holes if you guys keep on listening and sharing. And so with that, let's get practicing.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Modern Saxophonist Podcast. You can find us at www.themodernsaxophonist.com. We're also on Twitter @themodernsax.